Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of LPA Live. We are LP Alliance, an inter-caucus coalition, rebuilding the Libertarian Party and revolutionizing the Liberty Movement. My name is Amanda Griffiths. I'm here with Kyle Davis, and very shortly we will be joined by Mike Termott. As many of you know, Mike Termott recently announced that he would be leaving the Libertarian Party to join the RLC, the Republican Liberty Caucus. This, understandably, invoked some ire among many libertarians, including some in LP Alliance. And it's worth asking why we're doing this interview with him. In the first place, we like talking to a lot of people. There are very few people whom we wouldn't want to bring on and have a conversation with. In the second place, as a critic of the Kingmaker strategy, and immense critic of the Kingmaker strategy, I thought it was important to highlight, and we thought it was important to highlight, how coalitions do and don't work, when it makes sense to align, and the ways in which it makes sense to align with a major party, and the ways in which it doesn't. From the very beginning, and full disclosure, the interview was not my idea, but from the very beginning, I and many others had been writing about how the Kingmaker strategy was not the way to go about doing this, that if you wanted to make a change and make a major party more libertarian, then the way to do that was to go into that major party and form or join a libertarian-oriented caucus. Well, Mike Termott did that. And so we want to talk about his thinking that led to that decision. We will certainly have some pushback on some of the things that he says about where the Libertarian Party is headed, I'm sure, things that we don't believe. And we're excited to take your questions as well. Kyle, why are you here? Why did you betray the Libertarian Party so horribly by interviewing a Republican?
So I was on the Chase Termott campaign. I did data analysis with the team, and Mike reached out as he's been trying to talk to libertarians and give his spiel about why it makes sense to go to the RLC. I was upfront with him that I am not interested in that at the time. I still believe that this party can be saved, and this is the best vehicle for revolution and the change that we want to see. Hey, Free. I believe that Mike Termott is very much still a libertarian. I think that he sees the best vehicle for change for him in the RLC. This is something that we've talked about dozens of times, and I think that it's a good thing to talk to everybody about. So Mike will be on in just a minute. I did talk to him again just a minute ago. He's on his way. He's a busy man. And we will give a good, kind of a round table between the three of us, at least, on what are we thinking and everything else. I think LPA has been pretty straightforward, like you've said, that we think that if you believe the Republicans have the best way forward, you should be with the Republicans. We're not going to be mad at you. We're not going to think negatively of you for that. We'll disagree with you. I believe the Libertarian Party is the way forward, but we need libertarians everywhere. We need Libertarian Democrats, Libertarian Republicans, Libertarian Greens, so it doesn't matter. If you can get a Libertarian into the American Communist group, have at.
What, did you just point at me?
No, I wiggled, but...
no, it seemed like a point to me. It registered as a point.
Sorry, comrade. So, this is intended as an interview with someone who is embodying those ideals, is trying to explain why those things matter and why he's going that way. Mike, I think, is a very strong spoken person, and I think that anybody who watches us will care what he has to say here, even if they don't agree.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is not, I don't think he expects a softball interview, but we do want to have a discussion, right? I much prefer someone who feels that they're more aligned with the right to go to the Republican Party. as opposed to recruiting people on the right to come into the Libertarian Party and change it that way. That's the wrong approach. We want to be expanding outward, not drawing others inward. The Libertarian Party is for libertarians. Libertarian action is for everyone. Libertarian ideas are for everyone. And sometimes, very often that extends outside of the Libertarian Party, but we need to keep the Libertarian Party as a vehicle for libertarians, for libertarian leadership of our movement. And that's why I think it's an incredibly good thing that Mike chose to do it this way, as opposed to trying to change the Libertarian Party's ideology and makeup in the process, or rather makeup and then ideology in the process. So it's good. And hopefully we'll be seeing people doing this with the Democrats as well. Hopefully we'll be seeing people go and be among libertarian-oriented Democrats, especially because the Democratic Party is an incredibly viable vehicle as it is currently, pretty downtrodden and fractured.
That, Mike is here.
I would like to see people going there as well. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Nice to see both of you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for reaching out to Kyle.
And then shake my hand again in Alabama.
Alabama's a good place to be. Where are you guys right now?
I'm in Atlanta, approximately.
Currently, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a Chicago suburb, as I tell everyone. So, yes, Madison.
It's not really a Chicago suburb, but
no, but everyone within 2 hours or so, Chicago calls where they live a Chicago suburb, for better or for worse. But yeah.
Did you go to school there?
I went to school in Chicago. Well, I got my MA in Chicago, and I'm getting my PhD now at UW-Madison. So,
where did you go to school in Chicago?
U Chicago.
Nice.
So lots of fun. Good place.
Yep. I grew up around there. My family is
wow.
3-generation Chicago.
Oh my goodness.
My sister went to Madison.
Nice.
How did you go from Chicago to Virginia, though? Like, ugh.
Me?
Mike.
Oh, Mike. Okay. Because I've also done time in Virginia. Yeah, that is an interesting story. How did you go from Chicago to Virginia?
Well, I went to school in New York State and then went to work in the banking industry in and around New York City for a while. When I went back to school, I went to the George Washington University in Washington, went to work for the government, and then went to work for, the governmental industry, the surrounding industrial apparatus around the policy community, and eventually wound up living in the suburbs, the Washington suburbs in Virginia that really are suburbs, unlike Madison.
Right.
And now I live, Nancy and I, my wife, we live in Eastern Virginia, which is to say east of Richmond, east of Fredericksburg, between the Potomac and the Rappahannock.
Very nice.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. After spending 20 years in Florida, which is the strangest part of the story.
Wow.
That's retiring a little too early for you, isn't it? Like you're supposed to go to Florida last, not
yeah, right. Well, when I went to Florida, I had already had my own business and so could live, anywhere. So I wound up in Florida, and then after we wrapped up the business, I went to work as a police officer. I went to the police academy in around 2010 and worked for Broward County, Florida for 11 and a half years.
So we definitely want to get into talk with the RLC change and things from the LP. There is a breaking news story happening right now that
what's that?
Donald Trump has from Truth Social. This is a quote. "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan." I'm sorry, I do not speak Arabic. We do not speak Persian either, or Farsi. "All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter." It's a tweet from.
Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't aware of that. I've been on the phone most of the past couple of hours, so thanks for catching me up. When did he make the announcement?
This is
20 minutes ago.
16 minutes ago, I see the post, but yes.
Yeah.
That's something. Well, we can't be completely surprised. He had indicated that this was a possibility.
Yes. I think Free is asking for comment now, which you sort of gave, but yes, for further comments on that.
No, okay. This is your show. I'll follow your lead.
Sure.
Look, the big issue. There's a couple of big issues that remain to be seen. Right. One is what happens next in terms of a response from the Iranians, and of course, the other is what does that imply for a response from the U.S. government. The big thing that we're trying to avoid here is a long-term conflict. And the other big thing that we're trying to avoid, particularly in the long run, is further linkage between sort of the obligatory nature of American foreign policy with Israeli government foreign policy. These are two different government organizations that deserve and should have an independent foreign policy. And I think for this reason, there are two different debates that have been going on. One is how you feel about Israeli policy the past, either the, past couple of weeks or the past couple of decades, depending on how you look at it. And the other debate is whether or not the United States should be involved with any of this. And importantly, those are two different debates that all too often, particularly in domestic politics here in America, those debates get conflated. We have a lot of politicians here in the United States who would like you to believe that if you're pro-Israel, that necessarily means that you believe that United States foreign policy should be joined at the hip to Israeli foreign policy, and that's just not the case. So I'm disappointed that the United States is involved in this. I don't think that we can be completely shocked, given that the administration has been warning us, nor, to be fair to the administration, nor is it completely without logic. I think we all understand why this was done. It's going to be hard to chant death to America for 5 decades or so, pledge to get a nuclear bomb and wipe American allies off the face of the earth, and then go opaque in terms of the development of your nuclear capabilities. Those are things that I think, to be fair to American politicians, even though they've done something that I wouldn't have done, to be fair, at the very least, from the Iranian point of view, you shouldn't say that you're shocked, right? You can't act like you're terribly surprised, and you can't act like you didn't have some responsibility in triggering this. That doesn't mean that I would have done this, but no one should be completely shocked.
You did, to transition a bit, you did run as the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in the 2024 election. You, of course, now just recently announced that you are moving to the Republican Party and the Republican Liberty Caucus. Of course, I think the biggest question that everyone has is why that decision, and how did that end up being so rapid for you?
Don't know exactly what you mean by rapid. We can explore that in a minute. The decision was made as a combination of 2 or 3 different things. One, of course, is that a lot of folks on our team, a lot of folks around the LP and me in particular, we have lost a certain amount of faith in the Libertarian Party's forward-looking ability to get things done in a fashion that we all have been hoping, right? The second factor is that the Republican Party is where the major debate is going to take place in American politics over the next few years, and probably over the next decade. I don't think the Democratic Party is in a place where they're going to play a major role in American politics in terms of driving a debate. I think you'd have to recognize that the Democratic Party really isn't even up to the starting line in terms of 2028 politics. And what I mean by that is they're still looking back at 2024 without a full recognition of what it is that went wrong for them. So they're not really a major player in the intellectual policy debate in American political life. Nor would you say that it's very likely that other independent movements outside of the political duopoly are all of a sudden going to take root, sprout leaves, get something done that's important. I think Bobby Kennedy proved that you can be a charming and articulate politician named Kennedy, have hundreds of millions of dollars behind you, and this is still hard, right? So that really leaves the Republican Party. And I think most of us look at the Republican Party and realize it is a coalition of folks who have a lot in common, but not everything. I suppose all large parties could say the same thing. That's probably not an interesting statement. But the party is about to face one of the largest, possibly the largest political vacuum in a century, right? I don't even know what would be analogous. I don't know in American politics or anywhere else where you have the opportunity to anticipate a vacuum of that magnitude. And when President Trump leaves, I think there's going to be a lot of consternation, a significant battle to decide how that vacuum gets filled. And how that vacuum gets filled is going to be very, very important to the future of this nation, not just politically, but for our nation as a society as a whole.
For sure. To me, as far as American politics go, the most analogous time is probably the late 1800s, with the vacuum left after the Republican collapse from the Civil War, leading to kind of the progressives and the know-nothings getting some power, and both parties effectively becoming branches of that little party that never actually got its own power.
I think that is an interesting analogy, especially because there was such huge realignment during that period and leading into Reconstruction. You know, it's funny, before you said in American politics, and you had said, the late 1800s. I really thought that you were about to say, there was something weird on my mind, and I thought, wow, if Kyle has the same weird thought I do, that is going to be weird. It actually crossed my mind that Queen Victoria is the last time we had someone who, as an individual, right, an individual, so dominated politics in her time in her nation that her passing left such a vacuum. And I thought, well, that's not really very analogous. And then when you said late 1800s, I thought, well, that's weird. I wonder if Kyle's thinking the same thing I am.
I certainly like that one.
But there will be a big vacuum, and let's face it. However you feel about Donald Trump, you'd be hard pressed to make an argument that he's running a very consistent ideological game, right? He's got, he's got a lot of stuff going on there. And on the one hand, as libertarians, we recognize that he has some instincts that we appreciate. He is naturally skeptical of the value of projecting military power, notwithstanding his announcement of a half an hour ago. But he's, generally more skeptical of that than the neocons, his Republican predecessors and Democratic contemporaries, So, that's probably a good thing. And he's also naturally skeptical of big institutions and government power generally, as a businessman. He has certainly made remarks in the past that lead you to believe that he doesn't trust the efficacy of a lot of business regulation or even personal regulation. He doesn't trust the enormous amount of power that has been accumulated in unelected bureaucrats in Washington. So, there's a lot that overlaps with how libertarians see the world. And on the other hand, there's a lot of other weird stuff going on that, not so much, right? I think a lot of libertarians would agree that it's logical that Americans would want to get some control over the border. There's a lot to argue against the way the Biden administration handled immigration policy the past 4 years. I think most Americans demand that there be at least some vetting as people come across the border. None of that is illogical. Of all the things that we expect from federal government, and we should be expecting precious little, controlling the border is one of those things that virtually all Americans think is a good idea on some level or not. So, maybe you give that to Trump in the administration. And then you say that, the next step is, well, we are a nation of laws, and until we change the laws, people who are here illegally need to either get on a path to a legal status or be deported. We get all that. But then the administration goes and tosses in the dumpster the whole idea of prioritizing adjudicated criminals, the whole idea of working its way through a prioritized list, and then finds all kinds of new and weird ways to create examples of disregarding constitutional requirements for due process. And it just undermines it, ironically, I think it undermines President Trump's agenda. If you were a diehard Trumper, probably no one in this call is, but if you were a diehard Trumper and wanted to see the president's agenda succeed both in the short run and take hold in the long run, you can't be happy about some of the legal advice that the president has been given. And that's just one little example of why I think that the president is getting really bad staff work. I think he's surrounded by people who are just nincompoops. It's on some level, I think it's okay for a chief executive, for an elected official who is hired, who is voted into office because he thinks outside the box, because he doesn't like the status quo, because he thinks that we need to do things differently. It's okay for the boss to say, go get control over the border and throw everybody out of the United States who shouldn't be here, right? That's the kind of broad sweeping, perhaps overly simplistic guidance you might expect from a chief executive. It's not okay for subject matter experts to say, oh, the boss wants more deportations pronto, we better throw the Constitution in the toilet. That's a whole different can of worms. And that's just one example, but you get my point that inside the Republican Party, there's going to be schisms formed. Similarly, a lot of people want to rally around and support the president so he gets the budget he wants. On the other hand, there seems to be a disregard inside the Treasury Department for the fact that we're running into a financial collapse of the government, and lickety split. We're on the rails headed for it. If we're lucky, we got a decade. I guess it's conceivable if things go very, very right. You got 2 decades until it implodes. If it goes wrong, maybe you got less than a decade. I don't know what the timing is, but you can't spend a third of the budget on interest and think you're going to be able to make ends meet in a way that keeps your constituents happy. That's just not a thing that happens down here on planet reality.
Mm-hmm. I think you make a good point, certainly, about the tenuous nature, right, of the Republican Party currently. It being a weak party presently, much weaker than we've seen our major parties be in recent history, that does make it more, I think, vulnerable to usurpation. The interesting thing is that typically when you have a weak party and then it's usurped or overtaken, it's normally a candidate that does that, right? And then the candidate ends up leading. Arguably, this was the issue with the Progressive Party, which Kyle mentioned, that kind of surged to prominence for a little bit, and then La Follette dies, and we've got nothing. So it is certainly, I think, the place where a lot of the major policy battles are going to be playing out. You mentioned the Democratic Party just kind of being there, as it were, and not trying to, having its own identity crisis. The one issue that both major parties seem to have is there is certainly a populist wing to both of them. I hope that we could agree that there's some populism in both of them, at least. One thing that a minor party can do is provide that whatever is lacking between both major parties. And if there's a time for there to be sort of a replacement to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, it could be another prominent minor party. What do you see, if anything, the role of the LP being over the next several years, decade, what have you?
Great question. The short answer is I don't know, but let's see if we can peel that onion anyway. I think the Libertarian Party collectively needs to make a couple of real important existential decisions, to your point. It has occurred to me recently that the Libertarian Party might be better off not calling itself a party, might be better off not or possibly splitting into two groups so that at least one group doesn't have to be sort of burdened with the idea of backing candidates and the blocking and tackling of the things that parties do, right? And the reason I say that is because there are clearly different groups of people in the LP, and I don't mean that just from the standpoint of different ideologies. We have that too in the party, right? We have slightly different ideologies. I don't think the differences are anywhere near as big as the fights that those differences precipitate. Mm-hmm. But what I mean is different interests. We have a lot of people in the party that want to have a political party, that want to run for office, help others run for office, help gain ballot access, use political races to raise awareness of certain issues. And then you got a whole lot of people in the Libertarian Party who don't really have an interest in that. And that's okay to be someone who's not interested in what we might loosely call traditional politicking. But I don't think it's okay to have a huge proportion of membership in a political party who aren't interested in a political party. Mm-hmm. And when I say it's not okay, I don't mean like, and that makes somebody evil. No, I just mean it doesn't run as well as it might if it were in two different pools of people. Just, I don't know what that looks like structurally, but alternatively, we can try to push the Libertarian Party to be more focused on being a party and keep the name Libertarian Party and hope that it gains focus. I think over the next couple of years, in what I would call the short run, a lot of that will happen. I think the party will right its ship, get on a stronger footing, get better at some of the blocking and tackling. But I think it's hard to argue that the next 51 years are going to be significantly different in an upside positive, again, traditional politicking sort of way than the past 51 years. And that's not necessarily horrible. A lot of things have gone right the past 51 years. The party has helped raise awareness of certain issues. The party has championed legislation in certain cases, possibly without the Libertarian Party, people like Ron Paul wouldn't have become as well known. I don't know whether that's true or not, just throwing it out there for food for thought. So, the party's done a lot of terrific things. But in the long run, being the same as it has been the last 51 years doesn't fit with what I personally think we need to get done in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Mhm.
Well,
Our government
we
is
certainly agree with you
presenting-
there.
What's that, Kyle?
We certainly agree with you there. We think that change needs to happen basically everywhere. That's why the two of us are with the LP Alliance. That's the stream that you're on right now. We think that the party fundamentally needs change in direction. Not, for the record, necessarily change in direction, change and direction. Because right now we're kind of, we're listless with a broken mast, right? We're kind of floating in the water and being taken where the waters take us. And we have got to, lower the oars and push the ship.
Yeah, that's probably true. And to extend your metaphor further, I'm almost indifferent about which direction it goes, but you got to get the oars in the water and you got to start rowing.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that you pointed out, certainly all of us seem to be agreed that as long as the LP continues its current strategy, not much will change. There needs to be more. And you highlighted the fact that, so there's a contingent within the Libertarian Party that isn't comfortable with running candidates or with backing candidates. And then there's us, Kyle and myself, and LP Alliance, which says that we absolutely need to continue running candidates, but it can't be the only thing that we do, that major parties don't just run candidates either. They have educational apparatuses, all of this. So there absolutely needs to be more. If we continue just doing the bare minimum when it comes to running candidates and then nothing else, then no, that the next 51 years don't look any different. If we change that, though, we're at a time in US history, especially with regard to protest movements that keep on cropping up with increasing frequency the past several years, decade, what have you, that this can be a moment for more libertarian actors writ large, whether that's in the LP, GOP, Democratic Party, to take that ship and steer it. But it's going to require a lot of work. And I think it's going to require work outside the Libertarian Party as well. However, the Libertarian Party doesn't seem like a vehicle that can be abdicated either. So, yeah, I guess I'm wondering, you did run as the vice presidential candidate. So you said that the decision, to go to the GOP wasn't rapid. When did you sort of begin considering this? Did the campaign change or shape your thinking at all, your decision?
The campaign changes you in the following way. I don't know if this is a great answer to your question, but it's going to be an honest answer.
Sure.
So run with
it changes you in the sense that things that you already knew on paper become a lot more tangible. They feel more real, right? In other words, it's one thing to say, we don't have a lot of money. We're not going to raise a lot of money. The party hasn't raised a lot of money lately, and for all the reasons that we know, right? Mm-hmm. Internal this and internal that, donors leaving, messaging problems, splits, blah, blah, blah. We all know we all know a lot of reasons. We haven't been raising a lot of money. We're not going to raise a lot of money. It's one thing to say all that. It's another thing to be in a pickup truck going from a Motel 6 to a Motel 6, right? And it's another thing to stay home and make donor phone calls because what you can afford is to have one candidate out and one candidate on the phone.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that changes you a little bit, right? That changes a little bit. It raises a sense of urgency. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that I am convinced, let me connect the dots here. This may take me 30 seconds.
Sure.
I am convinced that the government is presenting to our society three distinct and important existential threats. To give you the condensed version, one is a financial collapse that we spoke about just a moment ago. Don't know when that exactly is coming, but probably in my lifetime, and I'm already 63. Number two, the possibility of a military conflict that we can't get out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that that's coming at any particular point in time, under any particular administration. I'm not trying to say that the Trump administration is doing anything that's accelerating that. But I would say you can't spin the wheel as often as the American government does and not anticipate that at some point something could go wrong and all of a sudden you're tripped into, I don't want to necessarily use the term World War III. I just did, but, a multi-theater international conflict with at least two nuclear powers on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know what your definition of World War III is, but that would be bad.
Right.
I'm not sure any war anymore can be anything other than a world war.
Well, that's an interesting. That is an interesting point, and that is worth considering. I think that's a very important point. Number three is something that we would have considered laughably unlikely when I was growing up, which is to say a downward spiral in civil unrest. That even a decade ago, I think a decade ago, I would have said, yeah, that would be bad. But it's so remotely likely, right? Just so unlikely
Mm-hmm.
that, come back
Right.
to me with a real threat.
Right.
And as
absolutely.
the years go by, you have to admit it's not getting less likely.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, I don't mean, the dopey stuff in Los Angeles, although that can get pretty ugly. I mean, imagine 2020 style rioting,
Mm-hmm.
The 1960s type of stuff. And we've had other examples. Imagine an authoritarian government overreacting. Use your imagination. I know you guys can't even imagine the National Guard being called out prematurely, but imagine someone were to do that. And imagine that, the rioters react badly and local governments and then the federal government react badly. And all of a sudden you've got martial law and a series of back and forth overreactions. You could imagine over the next few years something going wrong in a very different way than you would have said were even possible a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
Such as where our politics are going, such as where our society is going, such as where authoritarianism is going, and certain governments' natural reactions to things. I point out as a turning point a lot of what began in 2012 with the second Obama administration. We've been going away from the Constitution, not toward it. And
Sure.
that's got to make us nervous in any number of contexts. Okay, so given all of that, that's a much more bleak picture than years ago,
Mm-hmm.
small number of years ago. Given all of that, I think it's incumbent upon us, those who see these and believe that these threats are real and bad, to use a word, I think it's incumbent upon us to do whatever it is that we can do to stop it. And if that means doing some crazy shit and thinking outside the box, then we got to do some crazy shit and think outside the box.
All agreed there, yeah.
Yeah.
So is leaving a party hard? Of course it is. Of course it is. Going to be
Right.
resentment all the way around? Of course. And no one should be surprised by that.
As soon as the announcement leaked, so I didn't tell people before the announcement was leaked. We immediately put out a statement because we agree with you. We're not your enemies on this thing. We very much believe in the Republican Party needs to be a place where libertarians that think that's the best method for change go to and try to change that party. The same with the Democrats, the same with everybody. We want to see libertarians everywhere. And so, when you called me and we talked about it, it was like, I get it. I still think that this is the best place for me, so I'm staying here. But I don't have hard feelings toward you. I want you to be successful. I want you to prove me wrong, right? I want you to go out there and make the Republican Party more libertarian than the Libertarian Party's ever been.
That may be overshooting the mark, but I appreciate what you mean by that. And we all hope that, I think deep down inside, we all hope that we're all successful at whatever channels we're trying to make work. The other thing worth mentioning is it's worth a shot. Someone should be trying this. As a matter of fact, I think that we should have a constant back and forth among the parties, not just between the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party. I think that we ought to have, an exchange program, as it were. We ought to be sending people back and forth. And it would be hard to imagine doing that with the Democratic Party, but it'd probably do them good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine doing that back and forth between the Democrats and the Republicans too. So that might be a little pie in the sky, but you get my point. And the point I'd like to make is that not only should someone be trying this, but I think the logical person to do it is me. And that's for a couple different reasons. I used to be a Republican a long time ago. It's probably a little bit more comfortable fit for me than a lot of other places would be. I'm probably a little bit more socially conservative than some other people. It makes a little bit more sense, right? And this isn't just me trying to be a nice guy. Let me speak the truth. I don't think the Libertarian Party is going to fall apart because Mike Tremont is leaving, right? The party. I mean, I know some people.
Maybe not tomorrow, Mike, but I mean, give it a couple months. I don't know.
I know the party is pissy, but let's not exaggerate the significance of this, right? We all make a lot of hoopla because we want some attention, but the idea that this deserves people setting their hair on fire might be an overstatement of the impact on the Libertarian Party. I think everyone is going to be just fine. Whatever juice there was to squeeze out of Mike being in the LP has probably already been wrought, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's time to try something a little bit different.
I was I'm in Atlanta, so Chase is a whopping 8 minutes from me. His house is 8 minutes from me.
Yep.
So when he ran for Senate, he was a little further away then, but I liked him a ton. I liked what was going on there, and was very exciting. And so when he was running for presidential candidate, I was excited to see Chase running. And I wasn't sure who was going to end up with the VP nomination. And I kind of looked at everybody and was like, all right, I don't know for sure how this is going to go. And honestly, the more I've gotten to know you, the happier I've been about knowing you.
You're awfully kind. Probably more kind than I deserve, but thank you. I appreciate it.
His point of contrast is me. So, I mean, he's
true.
just terrified of me.
Oh, I see. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
Right.
Yeah. She's very violent. No. David Moscrip's watching right now, and I actually sent him a link where if he wants to come up and talk to, it's a thing that we're legitimately, we appreciate it, right? We appreciate this move to be to help make a place for the folks that want to fight in the Republican side right now.
Yeah.
And Tim from Swampcast, who I believe you have met before, has thrown down a thing that's, a fair point. that it's not just you leaving. Like, David is leaving, and there's lots of other people who are going with you. And I understand that fear. So, I think I've already kind of talked to this one. But I guess, do you have thoughts on this thought?
Well, I understand. I understand. I promised to send some folks back from the Republican Party to try to, maybe we can do a trade, try to make it up to you.
I still agree with scientific libertarians' take earlier in this, which is that as long as you're stealing their donor lists and sending them back, no hard feelings at all.
Yeah, I get that. Look, I think there's a couple of things that need to be said, including if anyone would like to join us, call me, right? So I don't want to miss my opportunity to get my recruiting statement in, and now I've gotten that out of the way.
Oh,
I think this
Jake Porter is not wishing you well.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, but that means that you've got to take JD Vance, okay?
Oh.
Equal trade.
Yeah, okay. So, don't kid a kidder, all right? I think it's worth saying that this can work as long as you don't define work as, taking over the world. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can be helpful. We can participate in local races, maybe even a congressional race here and there. Probably at the general election level where maybe there's a tight race and there's a liberty-minded Republican, and we feel like we can help make a difference with human resources or maybe a few pennies, and it would be worth it from the standpoint of making a statement. And as long as you don't get out ahead of your skis and define success as, Thomas Massey has to be the presidential nominee or this whole thing was a colossal failure, then I think that you can achieve some success and feel good about it. But what I don't think is a reasonable option is doing nothing. I think this is one of those moments when we're going to look back, moments at which we are going to look back from the future and say, what were you doing? What were you doing? Because it's a bit of a turning point. Through my entire lifetime, we have watched presidential candidates, Democrats and Republicans, characterize these races as the most important ever. And it's all been bullshit, like every single time. There have been times when you couldn't tell the difference between the candidates, and they're saying this is the most important election ever. And you're thinking, an irrational person would have to say, I'm pretty sure that everything is going to go pretty much the way it has the past 4, 8, 12, and 16 years, irrespective of which of you two dingleberries gets elected.
Exactly.
And for that reason, I think that what really matters is what goes on inside the party sometimes, right? I wonder, would the world have been different if Bernie Sanders had defeated Hillary Clinton? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a thought experiment.
It would have at least been an interesting race.
Yeah. And what happens, what happens if it's Ron DeSantis instead of Donald Trump? These things do matter in the long run. So I can't guarantee that there's going to be a difference between the Republican and the Democratic candidate in 28. But I can guarantee that if there's no difference, it'll be the result of something that took place over my dead body. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to be that guy that looks back 20 years from now and said, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. Right. No, it's true. You can accurately accuse me of not knowing what to do. no one knows the future and no one knows exactly what the best plan is. But no one's going to be able to accuse this team of not doing anything about it.
You spoke a few minutes ago, and you phrased it more eloquently than this. I can't quite phrase it the way that you did, but you said something about what needs to be accomplished within the next 5-10 years or something. And what are those specific goals for you that you want to have accomplished?
Well, there's big goals for our government and big goals for our caucus. At the governmental level, we need to find a way to force politicians to start adopting budgets that head us away from a financial collapse rather than accelerating toward it. Mm-hmm. It's got to blow your mind that everyone knows a financial collapse is coming and we're about to pass a budget that makes it worse instead of better. Like we're not even passing budgets that are neutral on this question, much less that seem to reflect the reality of the situation, which is we need to start making repairs. The second one is, and this is a weird one, I don't know if I'll be able to articulate this because I haven't much lately. There's a new issue, and that is the divisiveness in our politics per se. Mm-hmm. The violence, the rhetoric, the inability to work together, the inability to communicate, and the split in our commercial lives. When you're picking out coffee and razor blades based on whether or not their owners are taking Republican or Democratic positions, you're living in a weird world. And I think a lot of Americans are going to give some pushback to all of that in a way that goes larger than just the complaining we've been doing the last decade. I think that if a politician were to stand up and say, I've figured out how to defeat all this fractured discourse. I know how to bring America together. I don't know what that answer is right now. But if a politician were able to successfully assert, I figured it out, I can solve that, I think that's going to be huge. And the politicians in the 28 cycle who say, yeah, that sucks, I don't know what to do about it, that's putting a foot in the grave. You get where I'm going there.
Mm-hmm. That's basically what Kamala Harris did this last time. When they're like, how do we solve the economy? And it's like, oh, well, Joe's economy's been solid. It was like, oh,
yeah, what would you do differently? Nothing really comes to mind, but
it was like asking an LLM a question where basically how it answers the question is it just reaffirms the proposition. So, how would you plan to fix the economy? Yeah, the economy really needs to be fixed. I'm empathizing with you. No, that's not what we want. We want a solution.
It's like really bad AI 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. But if a politician were to be able to offer that up, I think that there is some success to be had there. And that's a sad place. You're living in a sad society when a politician can actually make some ground by saying, I'm going to help people all get along, right? That doesn't sound like much.
It's true though.
That's going to make some hay over the next few years.
Yeah.
And then down at our caucus level, like I say, if we can support a couple of candidates that win, or spectacularly lose and get recognized for being libertarian or, liberty-minded Republican. You don't have to be a full-blown libertarian necessarily to make the point. But if you're a liberty-minded Republican and I can go down in flames with you as a matter of principle, that might not be a bad thing. So a lot of that, and we would like to play a role. Everyone who can hear my voice, listen up. We would like to play a role in the presidential nomination process. We don't yet know what that looks like. We don't know whether that means Rand Paul's going to run and we're going to rally around him and campaign our brains out. That seems unlikely, but it's a happy story, so don't burst my bubble quite yet. Or whether that means pressuring, all 6 candidates. Goons, so some of them may be liberty-minded, though some others may be, pressuring all of them to make some statements about recognizing the threats that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
David, you are a big black ball with a, there we go. Look at you and your fan. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
What's up? No, thanks so much. Hey, Mike, I don't know if we've met before.
Yes,
but,
David, we met in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But I just wanted to jump on here. They sent me the link and say, yeah, obviously we're on the same page. But what I've been telling everybody is like, we're not abandoning libertarian values. We're finding the avenue where we can get more stuff done. And eventually, I think that a lot of our buddies are going to come back around and they're going to love us in the future after, all of this dies down. And you know why I'm saying this, but the point being like we're not abandoning anything. We're moving in the direction that we've always been moving. We're going to get so much stuff done and I can't wait. We can't talk about it, but we have 50 states worth of people jumping on board. And I'm sorry, Mike, if you get mad at me for blowing this, but I'm just saying like we have so many people jumping on board for this liberty movement that we're constructing. And I'm so excited about it. And so it's worth all the criticism that we're getting. It's worth everything. And Mike Termott is leading us in the right direction, and this is going to be freaking phenomenal when it comes down to it. So I'm going to shut up. That was just why I wanted to jump on here
and
and
say. An endorsement. It is, and I think people pick up from David, and this is endogenous. This is in no small part because of David. It is a very fun project. Mm-hmm. To be focused on the future, to be trying something that is both libertarian and at the same time feels a little bit new, right? And at the same time leans into a caucus that already has a number of strengths. We tend to forget that we're not trying to create something out of smoke and mirrors. The Republican Liberty Caucus has a robust and storied history, including some successes and including Ron Paul. And so being able to work with the people that are already in place has been a real joy. You got folks like John Dennis, the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus, has been so welcoming. All the board, all the leaders of the caucus have been so welcoming, so much fun to work with. Just a real joy. They've made us feel like they're glad that we're doing this. And that changes everything. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal to an outsider, but
no, actually,
when you're in a trench, it's nice to know someone gives a damn.
It speaks to me, and I'm going to speak for Kyle because I always do as well, that we're this is one of the things that we're doing. We're doing it in another medium. We're doing it in LP Alliance, but absolutely building something and to be a part of it that really takes the liberty movement and liberty forward. We would not be successful if libertarianism only stayed in the Libertarian Party. We couldn't get anything done. I don't think any of us want that. So all of these avenues are important and are vital. Again, we can't just reserve action and activism for the Libertarian Party. And when it comes to genuine libertarianism, I think any party has an obligation to do some ideological gatekeeping. If you're an ideological party, you want to be a party of conservatives, you need to do some ideological gatekeeping for that. Same for progressivism, same for libertarianism. So it's all about, as I said before you both came on, it's about having the Libertarian Party be for libertarians and the libertarian action and libertarian movement being for everyone. And again, that's going to take a lot of different outlets.
Absolutely.
That is well said. And so in that sense, we're lucky. Mm-hmm. We started this conversation months ago with the Republican Liberty Caucus. By the way, this wasn't my idea. This wasn't David's idea. This was the idea of a bunch of other people who said that they thought that this would work. And that
I'm still going to blame David. Just
We're going to blame David. Well, it depends. If this doesn't work, we're absolutely going to blame David. You
Dang
know
it, David.
Yeah.
You know that.
On the downside, like it's my problem.
And if this does
Anytime
work,
bad, David. Anytime good,
yeah.
Mike.
If this does work, it's going to be David who, right? We're going to throw him overboard. And that's that's politics. No one should be surprised by any of that. But this is a conversation that started a couple of months ago, not knowing where it would go, not knowing where we wanted it to go, much less where it would go. Structurally, what does it look like? Do we, just have a party together once a year? And then we just started leaning into the idea that the Republican Liberty Caucus is the right brand. It's got a lot of the right people. It's got the right history. It's got the right positioning. They're inside the Republican Party. We really want a piece of this. We want to be a part of that. We want to be in a supporting role. The other thing that needs to be said is that we're supporting a lot of folks that are already there, right? That's setting the bar pretty high for a libertarian to support others, both personally as individuals and structurally. We're used to, we're the smartest kids on the block. We do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah.
And, we still do whatever the hell we want, but we're supporting something that already exists. The analogy that came up a couple of nights ago in New Hampshire, that's a whole nother topic. We just got back from Pork Fest.
Oh, dear. Okay.
We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to spin that thing faster, right?
Right.
Are you guys taking Jeremy Kaufman? You saving us from Jeremy Kaufman? I'm sorry.
That was last year's task. Last year's task was to meet with Jeremy Kaufman. I think I've paid my Pork Fest dues. I didn't need to go through that this year. He obviously didn't take my advice. Let's put it that way.
Oof. So looking backwards a little bit, how we've had Chase on before. We've and obviously I was on the campaign, so I've seen some of the inside. But what was your perception of? I guess I'm going to make it a trifold question here. What was your perception as far as how the party handled you guys, the party being leadership, how the party handled you guys, the party being the membership, and how the party handled you guys being the actual campaign itself?
The campaign, working backwards, the campaign did what it could with what it had, right? And I realized that there's a chicken and egg there. If you got more money, you get more staff, and you get more staff, you get more money, and you get more money, you make more trips, and you make more trips, you get more media attention, you get more money. I understand this. But having said that, the backdrop against which we were trying to raise money was so difficult that I think it would be really profoundly unfair to blame people in the campaign. I know this is a little bit self-serving because I'm one of those guys that was making a hell of a lot of fundraising phone calls. So part of what I'm saying is don't blame me. I was trying to make phone calls. But there are a lot of other people who are trying to, a lot of other people made a lot more phone calls than I did. And I think it would be unfair to blame the campaign's fundraising apparatus for all of that. I think that it would be hard to blame the campaign apparatus for, all the things that people get upset about from time to time. People wish that we had gotten more votes or more media attention or more money or more anything. I get all that. I wish that we had too. And, that's too bad. It was a very difficult situation. And you didn't ask a question that I suspect people are dying to ask anyway, and that's Chase. And I think a couple of things are really important to say. Even if this doesn't help my cause, I want to say them anyway, because it's the truth. I think Chase was a good candidate. Mm-hmm. And I think Chase was a good candidate both from the standpoint of his skill set and his hard work, and from the standpoint of his principles, messaging, prioritizing. Did he do everything exactly the way I would have done? No, of course not. Of course not. I think he's probably proud to say the opposite too, Mike's a good guy, but, I wouldn't have said everything that came out of that guy's pie hole. I'm sure that Chase has to say that from time to time. But Chase was a good candidate. The differences between what he would say and maybe what I would say or anyone else in the party, I know it seems real important to some people inside the Libertarian Party. To a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, man, most people would have a real hard time discerning a difference.
Right.
And, inside of the campaign, we kind of viewed us as a unifying ticket. We're so different. Really? Really? To a Republican or a Democrat?
Yeah.
I'm not sure they could tell the difference.
But you were the big cop and thereby authoritarian, and Chase
yes,
is gay and therefore he's really far left.
And he was the peace activist. And the fact that we agreed on foreign affairs issues and how to restructure police work, that's just something that people would have to overlook in order to find differences.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I think that's worth mentioning because it's the truth. As far as the party goes, could the party have done some things differently? Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning that I see the role of the party fundamentally different than a lot of other people do. That a party really only has one asset, and that is the brand. And everyone's job is to build that brand. If you're not building that brand, you're not doing your job. Get the hell out of the way and make room for someone else who is going to build that brand.
Yep.
And we had too many cases in which instead of building on the brand, we traded on the brand. So I understand.
Neither obviously Mike, but
Chase wouldn't be bombed. That's right. And neither would I. So,
Right.
There is a difference between Chase and Donald Trump. There's just not a huge difference between Chase and Mike.
Yeah.
There were things that the board did, that the leadership did, that I wouldn't have done because I think it was a short-term play rather than a long-term play. A play, maybe people did things that they thought were the best idea in the short run because there was some desperation, maybe because we needed money, maybe because we need to raise awareness, maybe because we needed to leverage a relationship with the Republican Party. In other words, I don't want to say because we disagreed on these tactics, I think that they're bad people. That's not where I'm going, and I don't believe that that's true. Sure. I think that we had a lot of leaders that saw things differently than I did, but you got to give them credit for thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box, I would have preferred they were staying in. Okay, they made some decisions I wouldn't have made. But you got to give them at least a couple of points for playing hard. And I do believe in playing hard. I just wish that people accepted the reality that the party has no other long-term brand, no other long-term asset than the brand. That's it's everything. And if you're trading on it instead of building it, you're playing this game wrong. You're playing a short-term game with short-term interests, and that doesn't work out in the long run. And,
I don't know if you're a
car
racing fan or not.
It's tricky because we elect people for these positions for relatively brief periods of time, and we ask them to make decisions that are going to benefit or hurt the party for decades.
Right.
So there's a mismatch. So you're relying on, in no small part, people's character or vision. And those are the kinds of things that you need to evaluate before you put people in these roles. A lot of us know, and David does too, a lot of us know Steve and Nikayla. I think he's a great guy. Is he the guy who's going to, save the party? Maybe, I don't know.
He'll tell you no. He's not intending to run again next time around. So
we'll see. Okay, we'll see. But he does have the right attitude. He knows what's important. He has the right skill set. Whether the opportunities present themselves and he's able to capitalize on them remains to be seen.
For sure.
What do you foresee, since we did a trip backward, now we can go forward. What do you foresee, and this can be for both of you, as being the main roadblocks to getting your vision actuated in the Republican Party?
I think the only thing that could stop us would be something really sad. Honestly, I think that we have a tremendous opportunity. I think the party is going to be in pieces, not necessarily in a bad way, but in factions. Mm-hmm. And so there will be groups of Republicans who want to support us a great deal. So I don't anticipate an inability to attract people to our cause. The big issue is whether that will translate into enough juice to actually get a great deal done. The one thing I worry about is that this becomes a 3-year and out project, and I think it should be a 7-year project. So in the relatively short run, I just want to make sure we get enough juice to keep us going through the next cycle after that. Because as everybody knows, getting a lot done in 3 years is a pretty quick ask. We're going to take a shot at it, but it's a quick ask. I'm interested in what David might think about that.
Yeah, I'm way more optimistic about that. Like, I think that we're going to have some significant progress that we're going to see in 2026. There's a lot of like municipal elections that I'm excited about for 2027, and that's going to lead us to go headlong into 28, whatever that looks like. And so, I mean, Mike is a realist. He's looking at the numbers. He's trying to say, here's what's likely. And I'm like an optimist. I'm like, nah, no, come on, man. We're gonna blow this out of the water. This is gonna be awesome. And that's it. I wouldn't jump into anything unless I had that mentality. And so I would tell any of you in the comments, I know my buddy Scientific and many of you are watching. I would tell you guys, like, this is the wave you need to ride. Like the pastor in Indianapolis that I respect a lot. His name's Tony Portell. If he's watching this, he helped found Life Church, and his thing that he always told me was like, ride the wave, David. Whatever God's doing, ride the wave. And I feel like that's what we're doing right now.
It's going to be a significant wave. I think that's well said. The other thing worth mentioning is that there will be places where we shoot the lights out. And then there'll be other places where we got a lot of digging still to do on that ditch, right?
Sure.
But there will absolutely be places where we shoot the lights out.
We have a question from Phil Ryan on this one. Well, he's got a statement, but I'd like to turn it into a question.
I think that's right. I think that's well said. I think that is something that we need to be careful of. Mm-hmm. I want to draw a distinction between pandering to Trump, which I think might be a slightly heavy-handed accusation, but I get where you're coming from. And on the other hand, a more realistic concern, but necessity, is to draw a distinction between what it is that Trump does that we recognize as probably a good idea, at least in motivation, and all the crap that comes with that, both in terms of bad staff work and goofy ideas the president has that don't get corrected, and his disregard for secondary implications of his policies, and in many cases disregard for constitutional limits, which also goes in the category of getting bad staff work. So, my message is that President Trump himself is a mixed bag, and that necessarily implies that those in the party are going to be mixed up in how they feel about it. It gets very, very complex. And I don't think we do ourselves any good in terms of either recruitment or honesty to say everything President Trump says is stupid, or everything that he's trying to do is wrong.
Right.
So I know that we have broken the hour.
Bye.
He just shuts off.
Don't.
David's like, I just got here. What?
Yeah. We're just gonna continue.
No.
Now an hour with
jumped on
David.
here. You guys sent me the link, and I was like, oh man, did I miss something? But here's what I would say is like, it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of Trump, right? But the thing is like, we have to look at the policies. We have to look at what is actually being accomplished. And that's very different than being a fan of a person. And I think that's where we tend to maybe be ignorant, if I can say that, is when we look at the individual and we say we don't like that guy, right? So here's the thing, is like, I'm a history geek. You guys got to give me that, right? So going back to so JFK and that entire era is one of my favorite times in history to explore. And we would say objectively now, if JFK had the same magnifying lens on him that Trump has, we would say he's the worst human being ever, right? But looking back, what we see now is he's standing up against the military industrial complex. He's doing all of these things. And so that's what I want people to think when we're talking about Trump, is yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of people that we would look at if they had a 24/7 news cycle examining every move they made, and we would be very mad about it. But at the same time, if we look at their policies in the context of history, we have a very different view of them, 20 or 30 or 40 years from now.
Well, that's interesting.
Jake, you're not wrong.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to try to phrase that more kindly. I'm really a policy. I'm an action.
We're trying to avoid it getting too simplistic. You picked out some policies that we don't like, but
Jake's unhappy.
That's not the same thing as saying those are all of his policies. You cherry pick those, and
they're fairly significant.
And good on you. You did a good job of it.
They are fairly significant. I think indicative of some pretty major things. I also want to know, though, slight detour, David. What's your period? What period do you like? You said JFK. Do you ever go? Do you ever venture toward Europe? Do you ever? Is European history a thing for you?
As soon as you said that you like history, I was like, "Oh, what have you done, David?"
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. You guys sent me a text and you sent me a link and said, "Can you please jump in here with Mike?" And I jumped on here.
I didn't do anything.
And I was like, I don't know. Was it you? I don't know.
It was me.
It's purely Kyle.
So yeah. So no. I would just say, and here's what I say all the time, is it's not fair to judge our current elected officials as if they had the same scrutiny as people in the past.
Right.
And but the thing is, yeah, I don't like a lot of these people, but I want to look at the policies. I want to look at their entire arc of history and say, maybe they're better than people we've had in the past, like Nixon and
we've done
JFK,
such a good job in this whole interview of riding that line of making no one mad, and David's
Oh my
just like,
gosh. Okay.
"Fuck it."
Okay. Nope. 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 Go ahead. Go ahead. Do it. Do it. Do it. What's the question you want? What's the question you want?
You just,
You know that I can blow this space up in a second. You know that.
Joe, that's
Everybody.
funny.
Can,
You guys are great. It's been great to be able to spend so much
Yeah.
time with you. Thank you for doing this.
You're so welcome. I do think so. Phil brings up another good point, which is that one thing that I do think is necessary, right, is to pull in that Trump base that is now saying, wait, I didn't vote for war. I didn't vote for all of this. And certainly, I don't think these people have a home in the Libertarian Party. And I don't think it would be fair to pretend as though they did to anyone. But I do think it's fair, right, to, as the RLC, try and turn them and convert them. And that's what we hope that you'll be very successful in doing, is getting these Republicans who were recently brought in, or called the Trump base, what have you, or the MAGA base, who are starting to question things, give them a home in the Republican Party, have it not be with Donald Trump, have it be with, the RLC. So hopefully we'll be able to do that.
You're exactly right. And from your lips to God's ears, I think we're overlooking something that's really important, and that is that Donald Trump is leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and JD Vance is getting, I think, he's getting, I don't want to say groomed, because now that word's been so horribly
groomed is fine.
Yeah.
But because Donald Trump is on the way out, I think it would be a mistake to try to position all of this as a referendum on him. That's not where we're going, for a variety of reasons. I'm just pointing out that not the least of those reasons is that he's going to leave.
Right.
And having a referendum on a guy who's leaving, I think, is not as productive as other avenues.
Which is what's interesting, right? Because the data show that, there's a huge, now again, some people call it the MAGA base, some people call it the Trump base, but these are new voters, right, who came into the Republican Party with Donald Trump. And so, if they're going to stay somewhere, I'd rather have it be in the Republican Party than anywhere else, so that they are going to need some kind of, I feel Donald Trump is not ideological. I feel like they're going to need some kind of ideological depth or grounding that hopefully they can find with you all beyond just Donald Trump.
Yeah, you can't be comfortable in the long run without an ideological home.
Right.
That is absolutely true. You can pull off these hodgepodge populist coalitions for only so long.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thanks, guys. You guys have been terrific. You are a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
You too, Mike.
You're very good sport, so thanks.
All right, you take care.